how to have an argument in academic work. In this guide, I will be going over the steps to form a constructive argument which can be used in academic work. I will begin with core elements of an argument and then go on to explain how your argument should be presented. There are 5 key points to an argument, and in this guide we will go over them one by one with examples. You've got your claim, your reason, your evidence, your warrant, and your acknowledgement and response. So, we'll start with the claim. It's the most important point in an argument because you're explaining what it is you're arguing for. It's also known as the proposition or thesis. For example, if I started my argument by stating that Star Wars is the best franchise, you instantly know what the argument is going to be about. It gets the point across. Once you've given your claim, you go on to your reason. You want to explain why you believe that your claim is true. So, going back to my Star Wars example, I could say that Star Wars is the best movie franchise. I believe this because across the books, movies, and games, they have truly built a galaxy. After you've given your reason for believing your claim, you want to be able to back it up with evidence and give it some credibility. This is usually done through facts, data, or examples. In an academic argument, you would then cite your evidence. The next step would be to back up my reason with evidence. For my Star Wars example, I'm going to go online and find out how many books have been written since Star Wars' release 40 years ago. Then I'll cite my source at the end of the essay. You can read my example here. When it comes to university, you'll be expected to acknowledge counterpoints your audience may have. Since persuasive writing is at its core, finding out the truth and anybody seeking the truth can be perceived as trustworthy. It also gives you a chance to address any doubts your audience may have. So, the final step to my argument is the acknowledgement and response. As you can see, I've shown that I understand Star Wars is flawed, but I've also given an argument. Next up is the language of reasoning. There are 4 main types of reasoning. I'm going to go over each one in this guide. These are important for making it clear how your evidence supports your claim. First up is deductive reasoning. If X is true, then Y is likely true as well. Useful for making educated guesses regarding how people think. It's referred to as the top-down logic. Deductive reasoning starts with you making a broad, widely accepted assumption and then making a claim that relates to that fact. Got a short video for you to watch. So, as you can see, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character has never faced an enemy like the Predator before. It is completely alien to him, but he finds evidence of the Predator bleeding, and everything he has seen up until now that bleeds dies. So through deductive reasoning, he comes to the decision that the Predator can be killed. Next up is inductive reasoning. If X is a Y and Z is a Y, then they are all Ys. It's used for making generalized opinions based off of real-life observations. Brett K. Hayes says, inductive reasoning entails using existing knowledge or observations to make predictions about novel cases. It's known as bottom-up logic, so the opposite to deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning takes observations from real life and makes them into generalized statements. got another video to watch of Sherlock Holmes this time, the master of deduction, but actually in this scene he's using inductive reasoning. So, in this scene, Sherlock deconstructs every little observation he has made of Watson, and through inductive reasoning associates them with experiences he has had in life to make logical guesses. For example, he notices the scratch marks on the phone, something he knows is common with drunk people. So safely, he assumes that Watson's brother is a drunk. Alright, number 3. Analogical reasoning. Because our brains notice patterns, analogical reasoning is a very effective way of getting a point across. It's basically an analogy. So, in this next video, you'll see Forrest Gump making an analogy. It's probably the most famous analogy in film. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. We find comfort in patterns, so analogical reasoning is a powerful tool in arguments. It's used a lot in law. If two or more things are similar in one respect, in conclusion they are probably similar in others. You don't know what a chocolate is going to taste like until you bite it, and in the end, whether or not you enjoyed it, you still took a bite. Life is similar. You don't know whether each day will be a good one, but you won't know until you try. Lastly, we've got abductive reasoning. Abductive reasoning is something we use every single day. It is taking the information you've been given, for example, a car that has been left running by the side of the road, and coming to the most logical conclusion that the owner of the car will be back in a moment. It's similar to analogical reasoning. Swansea University says abductive reasoning, taking your best shot, typically begins with an incomplete set of observations and proceeds to the likeliest possible explanation for the set. Abductive reasoning yields the kind of daily decision making that does its best with the information at hand, which often is incomplete. So in this video, you see Jonah Hill's character seeing the owner of an expensive car and using abductive reasoning to come to the most likely conclusion that Leonardo's character, the car owner, must make a lot of money. Alright, next up is how to present your argument. I'm going to show you the different ways. First, you've got your topical strategy. This is a very simple concept to wrap your head around. You start with the most relevant topic and work your way down. This helps grab the reader's attention. It is used a lot in public speaking for this reason. Indiana State University says, by far the most common pattern for organising a speech is a topical organisational pattern. Organising by categories or dividing the topic into subtopics. The categories function as a way to help the speaker organise the message in a consistent fashion. The goal of a topical speech pattern is to create categories or chunks of information that go together to help support your original specific purpose. Next, we've got chronological order. Chronological order is simply ordering your argument in the order that the events played out. If you're going to make an argument that film has gotten stagnant over the last decade, you would look at early film to begin with and talk about how experimental things were and the original stories. Then work your way through the decades to show the lack of innovation comparatively in the more recent years. Next, there's strongest to weakest. So, starting with your strongest point and ending with your weakest gives you the opportunity to call back to your strongest point throughout your speech. It helps leave a memorable impression and ties your speech together in a nice little bundle. And finally, we've got the opposite, weakest to strongest. This method of presenting your argument lets you end in a high note. In some situations, especially when debating against someone else, you want your audience to be thinking about your final point long after saying it. This is used a lot in politicians when doing public speaking, and lets your speech build momentum. Alright, next up is evaluating an argument. First of all, we've got consistency. If I was making an argument claiming that a lot of players quit at the launch of World of Warcraft Classic, I wouldn't say everybody quit playing World of Warcraft Classic at launch because the queue times were ridiculously long, because it clearly contradicts itself. The queue times were only long because of the amount of players trying to get into the game. I might, however, say a lot of people were put off by the queue times at launch, which led to queue times of 15,000 players dropping to only 5,000 within the first week. You can see how I've used a fact to validate my argument. Then you've got your completion. You've got to make sure you back up your claim with all the relevant evidence. If you want to make a complete argument, you should make sure that you're supplying all the relevant evidence to support your claim. If it isn't enough to just say the sequels are the worst Star Wars trilogy, this doesn't prove anything, and is simply my opinion. But if I add evidence like Rian Johnson took Star Wars in a different direction with number 8, which left J.J. Abrams to try to tie up the loose ends in number 9, and then quote J.J. Abrams to back up the claim, like I've done here, it completes the argument. And finally, opposition. This is how you really take an argument to the next level. By addressing any counter-arguments, you not only come across as more reliable, but you also get the chance to explain why they are wrong and you are right. And finally, we've got the credibility of authors and claims. Choosing a credible author improves the credibility of Choosing a credible author improves the credibility of your argument. Picking an uncredible source can reflect badly on you and your argument. It can show that your research isn't necessarily correct. A big one to keep an eye out for is whether or not the author has anything to gain financially from your source. It is important to find out whether or not they are impartial. Avoid quoting Wikipedia because anybody can contribute to it and you never know what is and is not credible. You can, however, use their sources. You tend to want to look for sources like professional association websites, reputable newspapers and their websites, peer-reviewed work, colleges and universities. And professionals who have been in their industry for a long time. Research the author of your source. Find out if they've got the correct qualifications or experience in the industry, and whether or not they've got anything to gain financially. And then you want to make sure your source is recent to the last 10 years. And that's everything. I hope you've enjoyed. Goodbye.